let's talk about, oh boy. Let's talk to Tyler. Tyler, who is calling in from Canada. Tyler, you are live on Talk Heathen. What's up?
What's going on, guys? How you doing?
Having a grand old time, Tyler. How about yourself?
Oh, I'm having a great old day on the day of the Lord. You already know. So yeah, essentially, I'm calling in. Thanks to you guys, and I mean this with all positivity. You guys have sort of kickstarted this this sort of pursuit of, I guess, the truth. I guess, like, I've always been an atheist, but since discovering like the ACA, like you guys have really sort of kicked it into gear, and like I've kind of really fallen into the rabbit hole about like logic and stuff. Anyways, so I've kind of stumbled across my first sort of roadblock when it comes to, I guess, my beliefs here. And so I brought up the Ark of the Covenant because I was on TikTok the other day and I was scrolling and there was this like preacher guy and he basically was like, oh, they found the Ark of the Covenant. You should all be so scared. And I was like, okay, whatever. Like, sure. Like I've heard that one before. Right. And so I started doing a little bit of research and I learned about this guy, Ron Wyatt. Are you guys familiar with him?
Yes, we're familiar with Ron Wyatt. We've talked about Ron Wyatt on Talk Heathen before. At least I have.
Oh, cool.
Are you familiar with Ron Wyatt?
Not personally. I'm listening with fascinatedly. I want to know what's going on with your life.
Yeah, tell us what you know about Ron Wyatt, Tyler.
Okay, so from my understanding, Ron Wyatt was this. When I looked him up, he's apparently like an anesthesian, so like he's like a doctor. But fun fact, he decided to go to Jerusalem and like dig up a bunch of stuff because he, claims to have found the crucifixion site of Jesus and the Ark of the Covenant, God's earthly throne. And so this preacher TikTok guy, like I commented on his thing and I was like, okay, like what next? And he's like, well, go look up this stuff. So I did. And so I'm reading about Ron Wyatt. And so he actually has like an archaeological research page. And so that was actually like the last thing that I looked at, but I was looking at all this information about, the Ark of the Covenant and, maybe its whereabouts. And a lot of articles said that they don't have it. They don't have all this. And then, so then I go to Ron Wyatt's page, right. And he's got all these pictures and like, it's a pretty big article. And within the article, there's lots of pictures, of some of the stuff that they found down there. Like they found like this gold coin, which apparently dates back to like 135 AD. And they found like the hole in which like the crucifix was like in the ground and like all this stuff. And so I'm looking at all this stuff as I'm reading it. I'm like, well, that's like, I don't know. I feel like that's a pretty big deal. But then there's all like, essentially, I feel like I'm missing something because like a lot of the articles I read, they're like, no, they haven't found it or it's not real. And then I look at Ron Wyatt's stuff and, he's got like pictures of all this stuff that he finds on his dig. He found some rag with like Jesus' blood on it. And I'm like, holy crap. So
Okay. So
what am I missing here?
Let me tell you Jamie, you want to talk first?
Yeah. Firstly, how has he actually verified all these things to be authentic and have they been independently checked?
Well, I'll tell you this because I know a little bit about Ron Wyatt. Ron Wyatt, okay, if you're talking about creationists, okay, creationists don't even like Ron Wyatt. If you want to know about a creationist that gets criticized by other creationists, Ron Wyatt's your dude. You can look up the Genesis broadcasts, with Ken Ham and those guys. Even they have a written argument against Ron Wyatt's discoveries. Anesthesiologists don't make the best archaeologists. No. Turns out. Also, you can find fucking anything on TikTok. It's great. I literally saw a TikTok last week of a girl who said that other planets may not be real because she's never actually seen one in a telescope, and she thinks that and that gets like 1 million views because you have to do what somebody called this. Sorry, I'm going on a tangent, but like you ever see a TikTok and they do this voice where it's like, did you know that in 1905 scientists actually came up with the word
and they're all
homosexual and it didn't exist in the Bible before? Like they have that. Somebody called it the
classic.
It's the transatlantic accent for TikTokers, and it's the funniest term I've ever heard in my life. Anyway, okay, so obviously TikTok's not the best source of information, but Ron Wyatt famously criticized by other creationists because he just kind of goes to places and takes pictures of stuff and says, hey, look, I found this thing and this is like of Jesus or whatever. And every other person who actually works in the field and spends years of their life trying to even publish and do digs are like, no, man, that's not how it works. If you go to Jerusalem, I mean, there's full of places. There's like 19 different places where Jesus was supposedly crucified, right? Like it's a whole tourist industry over there. But Ron Wyatt is one of those dudes who's tried to make a living off of this. And again, when your homies in the creationist movement are even like, I don't know about this dog, like that's how you should know like something is wrong, because they'll use anything.
and here's the thing as well, right? Let's give him all of the benefit of all of the doubt, much doubt that there is. He found artifacts that were that old.
Yeah.
Verifiably. He found a rag with blood that is that old, and a coin that is that old. Does any of that prove that God's real, Jesus ascended, any of the miracles actually happened, that it's not just a box and a coin and a rag? That's another echelon above.
Yeah.
You've got to hit, man.
Yeah, it's true. So pseudo-archaeology is very big, has a lot of players in it. Ron Wyatt is just one of those players. So that's my take, if you want to know.
Yeah, no, totally. That's great. I guess you're totally right. Like, it's like, how exactly does that, and that's where I was kind of confused. And I was like, what better place to call, to get this sorted out than one of these shows? And so I was like, am I missing something? And yeah, essentially I kind of agree with you, when you kind of put it out in front of me like that, it's like it's just a box. At the end of the day, it's a box and a rag. And like, my kind of thing is like, I believe that Jesus was a real person, and I think that like, I don't doubt that any of these like biblical people were like real. Like, I don't know, like it's a pretty elaborate story if you ask me. It's like, sure, these people might have been real, but like all the miracles and stuff like that, like I guess to me it's a bunch of jabroni. So yeah, I guess to kind of further that question for the future, like what sort of like methodology would you recommend that I use? So if I ever come into another one of these roadblocks, like would just more research, or like what would you suggest I do in a situation like this in the future?
Go and see if it's verified by other sources that have no actual bias, or as little bias as possible, as little skin in the game as possible. So creationist geologist finds this, or geologist finds this. I'd always try and see what biases the people have. And everyone has biases. I have biases, Dan has biases, everyone has. We're human. We have.
Yeah, sure.
Check the biases, double check other sources by yourself.
Here's a couple things. One, this is like an unofficial sort of quick hand thing. Check if that person or topic has an article on Rational Wiki. I love looking at Rational Wiki because they catalog just like weird conspiracy stuff and also pseudo-archaeology and stuff. So if they have an article on there, chances are it's BS. They're not completely unbiased, obviously, but it's a good starting point. Another thing is, look, if you're seeing a claim that's being made, especially a big one like that within the field of archaeology, right? And it is like going against the grain. If it's really going against what you've commonly been led to assume about what's mainstream in the field, I have to take a step back and look at it and realize, even if I think that this is convincing, even if I think it's a good point, I'm actually not literally qualified to say, oh, actually, I think this should be accepted within mainstream archaeological sciences, right? Like, I don't have the credentials, but anybody else who is knowledgeable about this subject, they're going to be interested, right? And they're going to be able to want to verify that stuff. Ron Wyatt is one of those dudes who has several people who has written about his work specifically in debunking it. So, like, if you look up the name and you look at other sources on it, particularly academic ones, if you want to go the Google Scholar route, you can. Like, that's one of the ways to do it. But, that's tricky, too, because Ron's like a more popular person. If you find one of these more obscure ones, you should be even more, skeptical about that. Because, like, I want to see if they've actually published something through a university first before just saying, hey, I went to Jerusalem and I took a shovel out on Calvary and I just found Jesus's body, actually. So, we're just going to
totally.
We're just going to go with that.
Like, I didn't even know Ron Wyatt was up to all that.
Yeah.
Like, I had no idea Ron Wyatt was like not this like super credible guy. So,
yeah.
Like, that's actually really good information to kind of take away from this.
Yeah. And I appreciate that we try to want the truth.
Yeah.
That's another show that we have here. But look, we are interested in that. Whether you completely agree with our conclusions or not, that's one thing. but like we are interested in the methodologies, and I appreciate that you are willing to call us and talk to us about it, because like that's important to us.
It is, and apply that kind of intellectual rigor to everything, even things that you feel are true or come from credible sources. Don't go paranoid and distrust everything, but always double check. It's perfectly fine.
Okay, you can distrust everything you see on TikTok. I am willing to say that. Look, if look, I know like it used to be Facebook was like, oh, I saw it on Facebook. Now it's like TikTok. It's like, oh yeah, I saw it on TikTok, and so I know it's legit, right? That's the new thing we're living with. But anyway, Tyler, that's pretty much all the time I can give you today for this call. We do have to move on, but I appreciate you so much for calling in. Thanks so much for that. And,
thank you so much for your time, you guys. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Have a good one. See, that was a great call.
Yeah, it was nice to know that there's someone out there who's actually who's thinking and is willing to be a bit introspective. I love that.
I agree. I got the perspective, or I got the intuition that Tyler maybe isn't an atheist, maybe doesn't completely agree with our conclusions, but values what we have to say enough to say, hey, what do you think about this topic?
Yeah.
And how different that conversation was from our first one this morning is like, it's like, that's what we want to see on this show. Like, I don't like being mean to people. Like, I want to have a constructive dialogue, and not to like say like, oh, we should be the experts that people should consult us on everything. But it's like, no, like we have to have some discourse though, right?
I don't think I could call myself an expert on basically anything.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.